welcome to the Liz Career Coaching Podcast. My name is Liz Herrera and I'm your host. Today I am kicking off a new format to the podcast. I love wine and I love to learn about people's career stories and trajectories. So today we are doing a career happy hour. And I am so excited to be launching this segment with a longtime friend and someone that I admire dearly. Joe, thank you for joining me today on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
While I take a sip of my delicious red wine, and you have your glass of wine as well, right?
You. Salud.
Yes, cheers. Cheers, my friend. And I have to drink because people say that when you cheer, you have to have a sip.
Oh, there you go.
All right, so there you go. So Joe is a Chicago-based creative with 20 plus years experience, and his specialties include graphic design, photo art direction, branding, social media, and more. So today we're going to talk about all things graphic design, and I really just want to learn about your career trajectory, how you have arrived into your career, into your industry, and your overall journey.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of people that maybe are current graphic designers or people that want to tap into the industry or people that maybe want to shift into different organizations. So maybe you can offer some insight. But I would really like to begin with maybe you talking a little bit about your educational background. Are you the first in your family to go to college? If you can share a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, as a child, I was always drawing, getting in trouble in school for drawing instead of paying attention. I was probably drawing like Madonna or Martika or whatever pop star I was obsessed with at the time. And just growing up, I always excelled in arts. And I remember having this conversation with my grandfather. I was like, well, I want to be a painter. And no, you're going to starve to death. You can't do that. You'll be poor. And then I was like, well, what can I do that allows me to use my creativeness for a career and that also does not require me to study math at all, because I hate math and I'm awful at it. And in discussing with one of my art teachers, she was like, oh, well, you could be a graphic designer. It involves computers. And yeah, that's kind of what led me into that. And as far as being the first or not in my family to go to college, I don't think so. I know on my dad's side, maybe of the grandkids, I probably am, but I know one of my uncles in Mexico, my dad's one of 10 kids, and one uncle went to school because he was like the brainiac in the family, and they all just kind of worked their resources to make sure he was in college, and he became a professor. So there's that. And then on my mom's side, sorry, I talk a lot.
No, I love it, please.
Yeah. On my mom's side, I'm actually the youngest of 8 grandkids. So by the time I came around, there's probably like a 15-year age difference between me and the oldest. So by that point, they were like all in their 20s and, and they all went to college. It was just kind of something that was expected. And I'm probably the only one that sought a creative career because there's a lawyer, there's a doctor, engineer, just everything, up there. But then here's me, graphic designer.
No, and that's amazing, right? Because you didn't actually get to see anyone in your family pursue this type of path. Correct. And as you were saying, they're like saying like, well, you're not gonna make money or you're gonna be that starving artist.
Right.
And so, taking that risk, right? And going into the creative field. And so maybe talk to us a little bit about your educational background. Where'd you go to school? What exactly did you study? I don't know, there's like specific specialties.
Yeah. So I grew up in Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. And when it came time for college, I was actually very determined to be somewhere out of Milwaukee. Even back then, I was like, well, I want to get out of here and go somewhere else. I actually wanted to study school in Mexico. But my parents were like, okay, you can either go to school in Mexico, or they were toying with the idea of opening their own business. And they're like, either you stay here and help us with the business or go to school in Mexico. And I decided to stay there and help them with the business because they had a record store. And as you know, I'm a big music buff. And yeah, so I stayed behind. And so in school, I was working at the record store. I had a bunch of retail jobs. So I went to school at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, or MIAD as it's known. And let's see, what can I tell you about MIAD? It's a small school. So I've always gone to small schools. So that's kind of, I guess, where I'm comfortable at, but I didn't even realize it at the time. But it was a small school. It was probably 500 students. It's probably about the same size as my high school. Let's see, what else? We're sister schools with Marquette University. So a lot of people know Marquette. So, so yeah, it was a very small school, and, right away you select, your major. It's kind of different. I don't know. I can't speak for other universities or colleges because this is my experience from an art school, but your freshman year, we have what was called our foundation year. And you basically study everything, like graphic design, painting, sculpture, industrial design, just to kind of get your feet wet in all areas. Because a lot of students would be like, okay, well, I want to study this, but then, oh, I took this class and I'm really interested in that. But I was very focused, I want to do graphic design. I want to graduate in 4 years. I want to get out of Milwaukee.
So you had a plan. You're like, this is what I want to do. So you knew.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly I was going to end up in Chicago until, probably maybe junior or senior year, because I would spend a lot of time here and I just fell in love with it and just the energy. And I think the kind of work that I wanted to do, at least in Milwaukee, felt very limited. And I also studied photography as well. It was my minor and I never really fully pursued it, but it was something that I've always liked and enjoyed. So
okay, yeah. All right. So that was kind of an easy choice for you. You knew you wanted to do graphic design, so there was not a lot of exploration. So what do you currently do? Where do you work? And maybe describe your typical day.
Yeah. So I'm currently a senior graphic designer for Hickory Farms. I know everyone knows Hickory Farms. Christmas time, sausage, summer sausage.
And I enjoy it with a glass of wine, the charcuteries. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and basically there's a creative team. We're 3 designers and we all work under a creative director. And then we have our content editor / copy writer. And then we also have a digital asset manager. So we're a small creative team. And Hickory Farms was based in Ohio up until maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. The CEO was in the Chicago area and decided to relocate the company. I was actually at another food company. And well, that's another whole story that we can get into too about networking. But yeah, so I've been with the company, it was 4 years this summer.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and it's really cool. I love it because, I like working in-house. I worked on the agency side before, and, it's stressful, either way, as a lot of people who work in design, a lot of us end up in advertising. And yeah, I just like that I get to work on a variety of projects, things that are digital, everything from web design to email design, to packaging, social media. So I just like that it's, 360, you get to touch a little bit of everything.
That's interesting. So you just mentioned a few things that I'm like, okay, I want to ask you. So you say a lot of people will go into agency work. What are some of the other options? Where do people tend to go with this background?
Well, I think it depends too, where you're located. Here in Chicago, there's always been a strong, retail presence. It's also pharmaceuticals, a big industry in Chicago. I have a lot of friends that, former colleagues and friends that work in that area. Food as well, you wouldn't think that, but, there's a lot of companies that are based in Chicago, a lot of tech companies, a lot of social media companies. So I think, it's just a matter of finding what works for you and, just try everything, because you never know. I never thought I was going to end up working in food, and I love it. It's fun. So.
What are some of the projects that you've done that you feel have been your favorite, or what have you enjoyed? What projects have you enjoyed the most?
In my current role, I was brought on right before our rebrand. And that was really cool, just to relaunch the brand and, introduce it to a whole new market, a whole new audience. And just all the projects that entailed. We had to redesign all the packaging, our our website, our social presence. And I think probably one of the jobs that I've been really proud of, and it's something that I've gotten to do every year since I've been there, is to work on all our retail signage, which is, a lot of times when you go into the mall, that's where you would find Hickory Farms, like in the kiosk. But now, as people shop online more, like in the world of Amazon, we tended to do more like what we call our off-mall stores. So that's like, like your pop-up stores, like, as soon as it's a certain time of year, all of a sudden, we joke like, oh, all the Spirit Halloween stores are up. Well, then when they close, it's like, oh, the Hickory Farms that are stores like that take over. So, just yeah, it's very experiential to like, design like the, help design the layout of the store, what all the signage is going to look like. So that's a lot of fun. I've always had like an interest in interior design as well. So that's kind of plays into that, I guess.
Yeah, so you get to combine the different interests and skills into your current role.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would like to know, obviously you had to work to get to where you're at today in this current role. Can you share a little bit of your career trajectory? You graduate from college, you get this degree. Where did you start and kind of what did that path look like?
Yeah. So I kind of took advantage that my parents had their own business, and I would do all the advertising, the logo. I would change the logo like every year. I'd be like, well, I don't like the logo anymore. We're going to change the logo for the store. And their business was a record store. It was all Spanish language music. It was called Mundo Musical. And, like I would change, like I said, I would change the logo all the time. And then right during my senior year, I got a job with a Spanish language newspaper. It was a bilingual newspaper in Milwaukee called El Conquistador, which is something, I guess, similar what you guys had back in the day, like Éxito or La Raza, something like that, like a community newspaper. It was small, and I got hired to be a designer / translator. So that kind of led me into my first job in Chicago, which was for a company called the ABD Group. And I remember, I think I found the job on, was it monster.com? Was that?
Yes, yeah, that's a thing. That was a thing, or it's a thing. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm dating myself now, but this was 22 years ago. So yeah, I found this listing. They were like, advertising agency looking for bilingual designer. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. It's perfect. And it's in Chicago. Like, this is exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, I graduated in May of 1999. And by August, I had moved to Chicago. I had gotten the job.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was, I was so excited, it was a new city. I had been coming here all the time in college, even in high school. My parents, we would come to Chicago to 26th Street to go CD shopping, So it was just in my brain, like everything's in Chicago, like, so like, why not be here with all the fun? But yeah, that was my first job. So I was hired to, like I said, be a graphic designer / translator. And basically what I worked on for the first 5 years on and off were all the Spanish language ads for Sears. That was our main client. So I did Sears and NTB, I think it was a tire company. So I did everything for multicultural marketing. So that was where I got my start. So anything for the Latino community, so basically translating things into Spanish. We would do stuff for African American communities. Sometimes we would do stuff for even like the Asian publications in the city, or like throughout the nation, because it was, US based. So I got a crash course in advertising working at that.
That's very cool. Yeah. And so what did you, how long were you there? And then what was your next move afterwards?
So I was actually there for 5 years, but then I ended up staying with the company, but in another area. So it was like part of like a sister company, if that makes sense. And they kept getting bought out, and we kept changing names throughout the years. So by the time I left, it was called Shock. So, but I guess I was there, it was almost 15 years between the two different positions. Yeah, because I was there for 5 working on Sears. And then I got requested to be put on when Kmart bought Sears back in the day. So there was like a merger. So I was sent out to Troy, Michigan to work for our sister company called Meridian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was there for, maybe like 3 or 4 months.
Wait, so you lived in Michigan?
Not, well, I was commuting. They were sending us back and forth. So
From Chicago?
yeah, that was kind of interesting. You know, they would fly us out. We would stay in like corporate condos. It was fun, but at the same time, it was like, oh, I just want to go home. So yeah, so I got to work on the Kmart account. God, that was probably 10 years. And it was crazy. It was fun, even crazier. And, you know, I got to work on apparel and, you know, those were my departments. And I got to do like help select models for fashion shoots. And it was fun. But, you know, at the same time, it was like, God, I'm at this job like so long is like, is anyone, you know, because I tried to leave a couple times, but then I would always get the, well, why have you been there so long question. And it was just, I felt like, oh my God, I'm tainted. Nobody wants me. I'm never going to find another job. I'm going to be stuck at this company like forever. I don't want to become a lifer. Like, you know, oh yeah.
It's so easy to stay in comfort and
right.
you're there, but then it's like you feel stale and you're like, now how do I move? So what happened? Did you end up finding a new job?
So what ended up happening was Kmart decided to take a lot of their creative in-house. So we had a photo studio that we would shoot everything in here, like in the West Loop, but then they brought everything in-house. So like I would have to go out to Elgin once a week for, you know, meetings and stuff like that. And then just everything went in-house. So I was laid off, and I have to say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You know, I truly believe it. You know, I'm, as you know, cliche as it sounds, I think everything happens for a reason. And it was just kind of like the kick in the rear that I needed to like refocus my career, my skills. And that, like I said, it was just a blessing in disguise. It was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah, you know, and thank you for sharing that, because I feel that, you know, especially right now during this pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs.
Right.
Or, you know, I've heard people saying like, you know, I'm unemployed, I was laid off, but now I feel like I can reset. So you were saying like you were feeling stuck.
Right.
And so this happened and you're like, okay. So I mean, it's not an easy thing to go through, right? A layoff.
Right.
I've shared this before, you know, when Juan was laid off, and that's hard. I think anyone experiencing that, because you're like, okay, now what? Not like you're really forced
Right.
to think about your next move. So what happened? How did you bounce back from that layoff? What happened?
Well, I was lucky that, you know, I had been there for so long. So when it came time for my severance package, you know, I had like a nice cushion. So I actually ended up going to freelance for a little bit out at Sears Holdings because, you know, I had applied to work with an agency, with a temp agency. And, you know, that's something I would recommend too, to a lot of, especially like kids getting out of school, if they can't find something, just apply with all the different agencies, temp agencies. You never know what's going to come from that. And they were like, oh, well, you worked on Sears and Kmart in the past. You're perfect. You know, you already know everything. So it was like, you know, it was an easy job. But then a former coworker reached out to me and was like, hey, are you interested? Are you still looking? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, well, she's like, I'm a pampered chef. And I'm like, oh, like the cooking, like the Tupperware company-ish. I didn't want to say the multi-marketing. That's kind of what came into my head. It's like, yeah, like the Tupperware party type thing. Yeah. So they were hiring. So she suggested that I apply. And I actually went to interview for one position and they hired somebody else, but then they reached out to me again. Hey, we have another position that we think you'd be a good fit for. And that's how I ended up there. And, you know, like I said, it's really, I hate, you know, it's all about who you know, and it's about someone be like, hey, I remember so-and-so that I used to work with, they'd be a good fit for this position. And that's why I always say, like, you never know, like, if you don't take that chance, you know.
Yeah, and that you left a good impression, right?
Right.
So you always want to you leave your legacy, or you do your a great job, and then people remember you. And so tapping into your network, or that people remembered you, like, hey, are you looking? So were you sharing with people and with your network that you were job hunting?
I was sharing, like, you know, on social media and like LinkedIn. And yeah, she reached out to me, and you know, at first I was like, oh, I don't know. It's like, it's in the suburbs, because I've always worked in the city.
Yeah.
And at this point, I didn't even have a car anymore. I had sold it because, you know, I was like, I took the L everywhere, or, you know, the bus. And I was like, okay, well, you know, when they interviewed me and, you know, they were like, okay, well, it's in Addison. And I was like, well, where's Addison? I'm like the street? They're like, no, like the suburb. So I remember I had to buy a car. I had to, like, you know, figure out this whole new, you know, get used to this whole new commute. Cause I was so used to just hopping on the train and getting to work in like, you know, half hour, 45 minutes. And so, yeah, it just became this whole new way of life. And they were really cool. They were like, well, we know you live in the city, so you can come in later and just leave a little later.
Oh, that's cool.
They were super accommodating. And I was there for 2 years. And that same person that suggested that I come to Pampered Chef was actually who brought me onto Hickory Farms, because she ended up leaving, and she became the creative director at Hickory Farms. And one day she texts me and she's like, hey, are you interested in working in the city? And I was like, yes, tell me more. And it was just kind of like, you know, like bam, bam, bam. And it's just very fast and very furious. And it was probably one of the smoothest transitions I've ever had into a job. So
that's awesome. That you know, that it's the same person too, right? She's like, I need to bring you with.
yeah. You know, I had just texted her out of the blue, like, hey, congrats on your new gig. And then like, oh, thanks, you know, and then like a week later, hey, are you interested? And like, yes, I am. So
That's really amazing. I love, this is what I love. I love to hear those stories, right? Because here you are thinking, you know, I'm in this career, I'm doing this, and I'm kind of just here. But then things just completely shifted for you. You know,
right.
things happen, they're unexpected, but you were prepared. Whether
Right.
you thought so or not, you were definitely prepared. And again, leaving that positive mark with your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So given your many years of experience and that you work with so many different people, do you have colleagues that have started off in different careers and then maybe later on decided to pursue a career as a graphic designer? Do you have any colleagues like that?
I can think of like one or two. Like I do have a friend that who started off as an architect
Okay.
and ended up switching, making a career move to become a graphic designer. I think he just kind of got sick of the, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but it's just very, you know, I don't want to say strict, but very, you know, rigid,
Structured.
very structured, you know, because it's architecture. It's, you know, people's
You have
lives
to
in
be.
your hand. Yeah. And I think he just wanted something a little more relaxing, but still that would, you know, quench that creative thirst. And I know a couple people that I used to work with that started out as graphic designers and ended up switching. So there's also
Oh,
that. Yeah.
like what? Can you give an example? Do you remember?
Yeah. There was a girl I worked with at Pampered Chef, and she was a designer, but then she ended up switching out to become like a team leader, or like a, you know, a project leader for, and it was nothing creative, but it's something that she liked. And yeah.
Yeah, and I like to have these conversations because I feel that sometimes people think that once they've chosen a certain career path that they're stuck,
Right.
or that's all they have to do. And you go through all this schooling, all this training, but you have these transferable skills that you can, you know, pursue other paths. So I like that spin that you put, like, okay, people have actually left this craft
Right.
and doing other things. So that's important as well. So what let's say there are people, so you know, I have an audience where I have people that are in college or they're grad students, or people that are like, okay, I want to go back, I want to get back into the workforce, or I want to change careers. What about those people that are looking to pave a career in the graphic design industry currently in this time? What kind of tips would you have for those individuals?
I would say one thing that's really important is, you know, just to network, you know, put yourself out there, whether it be social media presence, a website. I know we were talking about this earlier because I've been working on my website.
So you have to take your own advice.
I do. I have to take my own advice. You know, I started it like before the pandemic, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna work on it, and then, you know, just kind of like fell by the wayside. You know, because you get really busy with other things in life. And the one thing too I would put out there is just to take any kind of opportunity that comes up, like as far as like freelance, even if it's pro bono, because you never know what that's going to lead to. Someone be like, oh, this person's a really good designer, you know, maybe we could tap them for this upcoming project, or so and so's hiring, oh, I work with this person, maybe they'd be a good fit. You know, you never know.
So what makes, let's say someone's already a graphic designer and they're looking to explore maybe a promotion or maybe move to different type of organization, or how you were talking about there's agency advertisement,
Mhm.
maybe they want to go into food. What makes a graphic designer competitive in your experience?
I think one thing is just being up on trends, whether it be graphic design trends, just trends in general, and just willing to learn new things. And, you don't, obviously you can go back to school and do things like that, but there's also so many resources on the internet. Like YouTube is like a great example. Even Instagram, there's so many, I follow so many different designers and YouTube accounts when like, well, how do I learn this program? And, some of them like break it down for you very simple, like, oh, like 2-minute lessons. And, it's just little things like that, because the more you use those skills or more you use, these new programs or things maybe you didn't know, that kind of like helps your skill set, and then those are things you can add to your resume. And when you're interviewing, you can be like, well, I may not be the greatest at this, but I'm learning, and I'm that I think that kind of shows too that you're willing to learn, that you're willing to adapt.
Are there any particular skills or software? I mean, obviously, I don't know anything about
Yeah,
graphic design, so I'm literally like, I'm legit like learning
yeah,
about your
yeah,
field,
yeah.
other than going on the website and learning about.
Well, in graphic design, we all use the Adobe platform, and that's like Photoshop, and
Yeah.
there's which is photo retouching and stuff like that. And there's like InDesign, which is used a lot for like desktop publishing, and Illustrator for doing graphics and vector art. And then there's also like video editing software that's out there. That's something I've been doing on my own, and that's something that I really like. And I've actually been able to use some of those skills at work. Sometimes
Hmm.
projects come up, be like, hey, we want to do a video. Like, oh, well, I do, I dabble with video a little bit. Let me help. So yeah, because you never know.
Do you have any online or like trainings that are like maybe free, that are some of your go-tos when you want to sharpen up on a particular skill?
Honestly, I just go to YouTube and like Google whatever it is I'm working on, because there are companies out there like lynda.com is very famous. And you can even check like with who you're working for, or if you're a student, because a lot of times they have free subscriptions, because you
Yes.
never know. Yeah, and just ask your fellow designers. Back when we were in the office before the pandemic, I would always just be like, hey, how do I do this? We were always helping each other out, and we still do that. We have like a group chat throughout the day that we're always like, hey, like I found this cool video how to do this effect, like just want to share it with you. And I think that's important too, just to not hoard everything and share with others, because you know
So it sounds like you don't work for an organization that's like cutthroat, right? It's like competitive, like it's
no,
your resource sharing.
right.
That's important, right? Like thinking about the culture of an organization. And essentially you thrive when you work in a team and you're sharing resources. I love that people are like, oh, you can learn this skill. It
Right,
only
right,
makes you better collectively, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So I guess I'll just put in a plug for people that, because you mentioned this, people that are, let's say if they're at a university, so like UIC, our students have access to LinkedIn Learning for
Okay.
free. And a lot of times our students don't know that, but there might be organizations that, like you said, have subscriptions.
Right.
And I want to say that's connected to lynda.com. And like a lot of the videos are quality. Like obviously you have to kind of look through, but it's such a great, there are a lot of great online tools that are free where you can pick up a skill. I learned how to do iMovie editing
Oh,
through
okay.
LinkedIn Learning. I mean, I'm not the best at it, but I try.
Right. You never know. And like a lot of times, even like as silly as it sounds, like look on like Groupon. Sometimes there's,
Oh,
they have,
yes.
like offers for, if you're like on a budget, and like during these times, a lot of us are, on a tight budget. Sometimes there's like, websites that have courses, and they have like a half off sale. There was one, oh, I wish I would have written down, and I saw it, but it was like for creatives, and it wasn't just necessarily graphic design, but it was like for anyone that wanted to take like how to learn to knit, or just whatever
Yes.
creative outlet you had, like photography. And it was like a quarter of the price at what the yearly price was. Things like that. You never know. Take advantage. Or
Joe, that's an excellent tip. And I'll tell you, I'm gonna just share this. Like I have such an admiration for people that are creative. And I think maybe that's why we're friends. I am not, I always tell people, like some of my friends, I'm like, I'm not creative, but I just admire people that are in these different areas. I love people that have that self-expression, and you are all just brilliant. And I admire that in your craft. And so I actually took a photography class, and I bought, it was through Groupon. And I just love, like, how to like just the sound of the shutter.
Yeah.
And just like, that's just so therapeutic, and I really enjoy it. So, that's not obviously not my career path, but it's just part of my interest, things that I enjoy. So I always tell people, like, if you find joy in something, even if it's not your full-time job, do it. Which leads me to my next question. A lot of times people like me will find creative outlets, but how do people that are creative, what is your creative outlet? What do you do?
Well, like I said, I'm into photography as well. Hobbies, I love music, and I have a hobby that of. I collect Barbies, and
Yes.
that's kind of become, it's taken on a life of its own. As a kid, I was allowed to play with Barbies up until a certain age, because then, I got the typical, those are for girls and you're too old and da 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 da. So, I kind of like put it in the back of, on the back burner. But then as an adult, I would always be like, oh, buy one here or there. And then it's what, 3 years ago? Well, over 3 years ago now, when my other dog had passed away, it just kind of became this coping mechanism. And then I found that I had this love for it. And then I also discovered that I had a love for photographing them. And so I have an Instagram account, and I love doing photo shoots, and it's just, that's my creative outlet. Kind of like, when I have a like tough day at work, I'm like, well, let me do some shoots and just something to get my mind off of things. It sounds silly, but it's super fun. And I encourage everyone to, like, if you have something fun and like that, or, if, as long as you're not harming anyone, I say go for it.
I love that. So Joe, how many Barbies do you have?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question.
I know. That's why I asked, because I've seen your collection.
Oh, the last time I counted, I think I was at like 160
Oh
or
my God.
70, but it's
I
like,
just think about my 7-year-old self, and that would be like heaven. That's amazing.
And I have other friends that are also collectors. And like this past weekend, we went to the swap meet here by my house, and we went nuts. And it's bad going with other collectors, because like, sure, buy it. You need it. You need that. And I'm
Yeah, you
like,
need it.
really? And then it's like I come out and I have like 20 more dolls to my collection. But it's
So
fun.
what does that look like? What do you do with that? Like, so you do photography, right? Because like, it's not, because I feel like you're making it sound like, yeah, you want to take pictures. Like, you're legit. Like, I've seen your stuff.
Uh-huh.
If people want to see it, like, where can they take a look?
So they can follow me on Instagram. My username is Barbicoa with a 0. So BARBI. Wait, let me spell. BAR. I can't even spell. So it's Barbie, BARBIEC0A. So Barbicoa. And it was a play on, because I'm Mexican American, and I wanted something that was very Mexican, but also Barbie. So it's a mix on the words barbacoa and Barbie. So Barbicoa. So I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on YouTube. I just started a channel, and I'm on Facebook too. So
I will put that in the show notes so that people can follow it. It is super cool. It's super interesting. You're so creative. It's so much fun. So I encourage people to follow you. Now, one last thing that I wanted to just, touch upon, freelance. So you do some freelance. I know I have to put a plug, like, you actually designed my podcast cover art.
Yeah.
And you've done other work for other projects that I've been involved in. So talk a little bit about your freelance, and then I guess people can find you on Facebook. That's what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So like I said, I have to work on my website, but I am on Facebook too as Joseph Valenzuela Design. So you can find me there. I started doing a lot of freelance when I worked for the agency where I was working on like Sears and Kmart. And I was always burned out, because I was doing like the inserts that would come in your Sunday paper for Kmart. And that's what I was doing like every day of the year for like 10 years. And I was just so burned out. And I was like, I need something else, like, to get my creative juices going. And then, friends or mutual friends would be like, hey, so-and-so is looking for someone to design a logo or a flyer. And then, I would get suggested, and it just kind of built up from there. And I have to say, I'm very grateful to people that recommend me for other jobs. And I think that's also important to know, just having a good relationship with your clients, because they might say, hey, I have this guy or girl that, does work for me. I recommend them, their work's really cool. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my regular clients. And yeah, I'd say like 4 to 5 regular clients that I'm doing work for. And I love it. It's something completely different than my day-to-day work. And I get to work on a lot of cool projects. A lot of it's in the arts as well. So it's just something that I enjoy a lot. And I also recommend other designers, or if you're looking for a job or you're not working right now, put yourself out there, because you never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was going to ask you, like, if you had any final tips or anything that you'd want to share with people that are looking to either do a career pivot, or maybe they're on the job hunt, anything that you want to share with my audience.
Yeah, no, just that, just put yourself out there, and just, like I said, be aware of what's happening in the design world. There's lots of different newsletters. There's lots of cool websites. I recommend Behance. It's behance.net or dribble.com. Those are, as a designer, I had a professor in college that told us, he said, good designers borrow, but great designers steal. And it's probably like my number one rule, because it's true. We all borrow from each other. And I'm not talking about, like legit plagiarizing something, but, just finding inspiration in what you see out there. And that's why like websites like Behance or Dribble, even just going on social media and checking out what like other designers are doing, or what other brands are putting out there, just because you never know what's going to inspire you. And there's always Google, and
That's right. Yes.
that's always fun. And yeah, you never know. And like I said, I've gotten to work on a lot of cool projects over the years, and I have some really cool projects that I just finished up for some freelance clients. So that's very exciting. So
yeah. Very cool. Well, cheers to that. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Joe. This is always fun. I love chatting with you, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about your career, your experience, your trajectory, and insight that you have into the graphic design field. So thank you so much. And you and I will definitely be in touch and maybe continue our wine night.
Sounds like a good plan.